Okay, this is programmed bismuth disk video number 2 or 3, I believe. Let's take a look at something that nobody's seen before. Here we have a 1-inch neodymium cube, programmed bismuth disk, which, as we all know, bismuth is diamagnetic, but diamagnetic is just a posterior attribute of a principle of what makes bismuth bismuth, and that is extreme high dielectric inertia. That is why bismuth is diamagnetic. Bismuth is saying bismuth is diamagnetic means nothing. Bismuth is diamagnetic, resultant to it having extremely high dielectric inertia, high neutron count, extremely stable element. So anyway, let's see if I can do this without hitting it. You're going to wonder what I'm doing. Just hold on a second. I got to learn to slow down on doing this because I'm thinking backwards again. Now let's try the other direction and notice that there is no reaction. So let's try counterclockwise. Slowly. Once in a rare while I'll hit it. I'll let you know if I actually do hit the bismuth or make physical contact. Nope. I made slight contact then. Not now, however. Let's try that fast. You'll notice we get nothing. Or fast in the other direction, clockwise. What I've done in programming the bismuth by applied field and electrostatic charge is that by applying a clockwise rotation to the bismuth, you're going to learn to do this slowly. Keep going too fast. You always accidentally hit it then. There we go. In applying a clockwise magnetic centrifugal divergent field to the bismuth, we know that the programmed bismuth has a dielectric inertia running clockwise throughout the entire disk, whereas just the regular bismuth pore has inertia going everywhere. So you're actually able to program bismuth like you do a magnet by dielectric coherence. I mean, that's the only reason a magnet operates the way it does. Magnets, I've already told you time and again, it's not operated by magnetism, it's operated by dielectric coherency. The same could be applied, and that's why I did it, to bismuth. Obviously, bismuth has no divergent magnetic attributes. It is diamagnetic, but that doesn't mean anything. It's like, well, great, I can create a levitation set using a tiny little neodymium cube like this and neodymium disks, but that doesn't mean anything. It's a posterior attribute. Bismuth is extremely high dielectric inertia. That is what makes bismuth diamagnetic resultantly. So we're looking at posterior attributes instead of the principle. The consubstantial principle of what makes bismuth bismuth and resultantly diamagnetic is its high dielectric inertia. So by programming bismuth, the wrong pole there, by programming bismuth with an applied electrostatic charge and applied field and its creation. I gotta learn to do this slower. Notice I'm using a clockwise rotation. I've programmed the bismuth to have a counterclockwise inertia looking face down. The only reason it's able to wobble like that is because there's a little tiny nub on the bottom, so it sits on the table like a top. Obviously that's the reason why it's able to wobble. Otherwise it would just sit there flat on the table. There's nothing underneath here, it's just a countertop. So and applying the one pole or the other pole in the same. See, I'm not touching it there. But if I go really fast, I get nothing, which is exactly what you would expect. Induced field from a dielectric reflector like copper or silver will act one way. More magnetic movement you get, the greater the electrification. Just the opposite with the high dielectric inertia of the bismuth. In programming it and making the dielectricity coherent in a clockwise fashion, which is why it is. And this is a really heavy disc, by the way. This is a hair. It's about 1/3 of a pound of bismuth. Bismuth is heavier than lead, remember. Not touching it. Not touching it. Anyway, nobody's ever seen this before. This is video 2 or 3 of programmed bismuth. It's also got some other interesting characteristics, but I will not go into that on the videos. One being, as I've already mentioned, it is able to levitate little tiny cube neos in a levitation kit, average about 9 and 10 millimeters higher of separation between the bismuth discs, which is neat in its own accord, but it's got a couple of other interesting properties. But as you'll see, in applying a divergent magnetic field to the bismuth in a counterclockwise fashion, I get nothing. But applying a field, I think I got it wrong, I said it wrong. I should stop making these videos at 3 o'clock in the morning. By applying a clockwise rotation divergent centrifugal field to the bismuth. Yeah, I had it wrong about 6 minutes ago. I gotta stop making these videos real early in the morning. I've got a looking face down. You're always confusing face down versus inside out. That's the lovely thing about inverse polarity and spin, is that by applying a clockwise field to my bismuth, I'm getting heavy wobble out of the bismuth because I have counterclockwise dielectric inertia. By applying a clockwise field, I've already made 4 of these. I've made them both ways. I confused this disc with the last one. This particular disc is clockwise, is face down, counterclockwise dielectric inertia, which is why I'm applying a clockwise. I gotta learn to go slower. Whoops, I accidentally hit it then. There we go. But nothing like this, or nothing by going fast, only slow. No touching there. Anyway, the point is that while it has obviously totally different inverse properties to a quote-unquote magnet, I'm able to program the same way I am. You need to create a magnet by dielectric capacitance that increase and resultant dielectric coherency in this magnet, like a neocube, from discharge cap banks to coils, or by stroking, obviously, soft iron and inducing dielectric coherence without an increase in dielectric capacitance by creating a soft magnet, if you will. But the same thing but inverse can be done to the bismuth, and that was the premise for actually creating programmed bismuth, is that I'm actually able to create a, well, you cannot call it a bismuth magnet, obviously. I mean, even a magnet is not a magnet, it's driven by dielectricity. But this, everybody thinks of bismuth. Well, bismuth is diamagnetic. Bismuth, its posterior attribute is diamagnetism. It repels little tiny magnets. Yes, that's true. It has low thermal conductivity, and low electrical conductivity, is because it has extremely high dielectric inertia. That is why also, as you'll see in the third book of Uncovering the Missing Secrets of Magnetism, why bismuth crystals under ideal perfect conditions, unlike iron pyrite, which will form perfect little cubes like this, you take the opposite of iron, what do you have? Here you have a spatial cube. Magnetism is polarization. What you'll notice, if you can do a Google search on it, perfect ideal crystalline bismuth growth, you'll actually end up with a hypercube or a tesseract formation. Instead of actually a flat surface, you'll have a sunken formation. So instead of a cube, you'll actually have an anticube. You'll actually see, they'll show them as pyramids, bismuth pyramids, but what's really occurring is the reason it's cooling like that, actually getting deflection on the camera from the magnetic polarity. The camera's interfering with the magnets interfering with the camera. The reason it actually forms those pyramids, it's not pyramids. Perfect ideal bismuth growths, you'll end up with, you'll find them, they're rather rare and very hard to grow, but what they do is they form hypercube formations or tesseract-like formations, literally an anti-cube. That's why bismuth actually cools on the outside and it starts cooling. They call it Hopper crystal formation, but that's actually only descriptive. It's not explicative. The reason it forms that is because of dielectric inertia. Bismuth has extremely high neutron count. It is extremely stable and it has high dielectric inertia. That is why bismuth acts the way it does. Yes, it is diamagnetic, but the reason it's diamagnetic is because it has extremely high dielectric inertia. That is the reason why you get Hopper crystal formations, which is a description, not an explanation. And that is why, as you'll see in the third edition of Uncovering the Missing Secrets of Magnetism, I compare pyrite next to bismuth crystal growth, where you actually get cube formations on iron versus anticubes. I mean, you can call them anticubes or hypercubes or tesseract formations, but the reason they form that way, the reason bismuth forms quote-unquote Hopper crystals, which is a description, not an explanation, is because of high dielectric inertia. And that was my entire premise using Platonic retroduction and simplex logic, which apparently nobody has anymore, to know that I could actually program bismuth like I could a magnet, except inversely. What I could do is I could program the bismuth to have a coherent inertia throughout its system, the same way I could any magnet could be programmed, and it's not programmed, but I mean it's induced from either increased dielectric capacitance or from mere induction. But I knew I was actually able to create that on the bismuth, and I was right. And it's got unique properties, a couple of which I won't mention. I don't mind telling anybody this because nobody will figure out how I did it. Nobody will. It took me a few attempts to get it right. So anyway, you've never seen this before, and you've gotten a glimpse as to what to expect in the third edition of Uncovering the Secrets of Magnetism. And in actually studying magnetism, we need to take a look at its, as its opposite. Take a look at the other side of the coin. Well, here's magnetism, but let's understand magnetism better by taking a look at the other side of the coin. Diamagnetism. Well, diamagnetism is incorrect also. We know that magnetism is incorrect because there's no such thing as magnetic attraction. Magnetism does not attract anything. It only displaces things. Resultantly, obviously what's reaching out into space is magnetism, but what is occurring is dielectric coherency or dielectric disruption of its inertia. Likewise is the case with bismuth. We say that bismuth is diamagnetic, but it's not diamagnetic as its principal property, but it is diamagnetic resultant posterior attribute of its high dielectric inertia. That is why, like iron pyrite, will form perfect little cube formations like this, although it's just a 1-inch neodymium iron boron. Whereas bismuth will form just under perfect conditions, which is never the case, because ultimately the metal has to cool, and if you don't pour it off right, if you just don't have mad crazy skills on growing bismuth crystals, you'll just end up with pretty little crystals, but you'll see little tiny ones. They'll actually form anticubes, or hypercubes. A tesseract formation. Literally each facet is sunk in. Like each one of these facets will be sunk in like an inverse pyramid on every little corner. That's the reason bismuth cools like that, and it's perfectly, logically, 100% undeniably the reason why bismuth cools that way. And there's actually some fascinating stuff that are looking into the Landau properties of bismuth, that it actually has, in bismuth crystalline formation, it actually has overunity properties. It's a really complex scientific paper that most people won't be able to wrap their minds around, but you can actually find it online. And let me know and I'll send you the link to it. It's hard for most people to read, but the summation of it is that bismuth actually has, although very minuscule, it has overunity properties in crystalline formation. Yes, I said overunity. Anyway, so now you've seen it. No trickery. There's nothing underneath the cabinet here. So I've got anti-clockwise dielectric inertia programmed into this bismuth disc. Here we go. I gotta learn to go slower. I know this is really exciting, right? You're like, oh God, you're putting me to sleep. Shut the hell up. But nobody's ever seen this before. Simplex Platonic retroductive logic. Via negativa is a lost thinking methodology. The same thinking methodology, by the way, used by Tesla, who he got it from Roger Boscovich. Roger Boscovich got it from the Paraphesian, an extremely complex text. If you try to read it, your brain will probably ooze out of your ears. There's a whole different level of thinking methodology that Newton, Faraday, Steinmetz, Tesla, Boscovich, that they used to come up with all the stuff that we use today. I mean, it's a completely lost art. It's absolutely lost. That's why the most intelligent stuff you'll ever read was composed 2,000 years ago. I mean, stuff that nobody could come up with today. I mean, you can literally argue for human de-evolution. While we're more technologically advanced, we're intellectually de-advanced. When we use magnets in everything we use today, including the camera that I'm filming this on, your cell phone, everything's got a bloody magnet in it. Everything. But there's not one person until now that's told you how a magnet works, why it works. There are a lot of descriptions, but no frigging explanations. I can get a description from a 10-year-old. Oh, look, it attracts iron. Look, it's a magnet. Well, that's a description, idiot. It's not an explanation. The world is full of descriptions. The world needs explanations. That's what separates out the common fool from wisdom. Anyway, yes, I'm making this video very early in the morning due to a lack of sleep, but anyway, I demonstrated the principles to you and showed you that I've actually applied the principles of the creation of a magnet from dielectric coherency and applied it to creating dielectric coherency in bismuth by programming it. I just use the word programming. Obviously no computers involved, just electrostatic fields and applied charges. I'm not going to tell anybody anything right now on how to do it. Well, thanks for watching. I hope that wasn't too boring. At least you could say you've seen something and you've learned something new today, even if you're bored witless by watching it. But soon I'll be coming out with a new ferrofluid solution. My own creation. It works like nothing else before. Probably can't see it here. I don't have a very good video of it. But it's got some interesting properties. I've had to make sure that it will be stable under extreme heat and cold and whatnot, so I have to do a lot of testing on it. And another batch here. Shake it up and amaze yourself with it. There's so many things to be invented by ferrofluid. So anyway, I've literally got like 100 more videos to make on magnetism, and the only reason I'm not cranking out a bunch right now is because I'm kicking my own butt on working on the 3rd edition of the book. So the reason I'm not churning out more videos right this second is that I'm kicking my own butt on the book, which is a good thing. You'll find out some fascinating stuff about dimagnetism, and specifically bismuth. And you'll understand that, well, bismuth isn't diamagnetic because it's diamagnetic. It's a principle of bismuth. No, bismuth is diamagnetic because it is extremely high dielectric inertia. That is what makes bismuth resultantly diamagnetic, is its extremely high dielectric inertia, which is why bismuth forms quote-unquote Hopper crystals, although they're technically like hypercubes. They're tesseract formations, are literally anti-cubes. I mean, you probably never heard that term before, but that's what they actually form. They literally form counterspatial-like cubes. I mean, they form anticubes. I mean, there's really no other way of saying it. Bismuth obviously is an element that has to go somewhere, so you can't literally say it's anti-spatial cube. Ultimately, there is a formation, but what they do form due to dielectric inertia is anti-spatial formations, literally the opposite of a cube, which you can actually find in the book illustrated, hand illustrated by Leonardo da Vinci. In the book, only 2 surviving copies exist, printed in 1509, called De Divina Proportione. It really talks, Leonardo da Vinci illustrates the cube, the solidus, and the anticube, the vacuus, in De Divina Proportione. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope I didn't bore you to death. I'm working my butt, grinding my butt to the nub on the book, so... Anyway, everything's free. You're not paying for anything, so... If you gotta complain, then I'll give you a refund.